Imagine this, you wake up in the dead of winter. The wind howls like a beast outside your wooden hut. There's no central heating, no electric blanket to keep you warm, and the fire that barely flickers in the corner is struggling to keep the frost from creeping in. Your breath hangs in the air like a ghostly mist. Outside, the ground is frozen solid, food is scarce, and the only thing standing between you and the merciless cold is your wit and resilience. The cold isn't just an inconvenience, it's a force of nature, a silent predator waiting to claim the weak. Your fingers stiffen as you try to tie your woolen cloak tighter around your shoulders. The water in the bucket is frozen solid. Even stepping outside to fetch firewood feels like a battle against the elements. And the worst part? This is just the beginning of a winter that will last for months. Welcome to the world of medieval peasants, where survival wasn't just about braving the cold, it was about outsmarting nature itself. How did they do it? What secrets did they use to endure the freezing months of winter? Well, you're about to find out. This is Brothers Explore, and today we're diving into the brutal, ingenious, and sometimes downright strange ways medieval peasants survived the winter chill. Chapter 1: The Cold Reality of Medieval Winters. Winter in medieval Europe wasn't just a season, it was a test of survival. With temperatures plummeting and food supplies running low, the average peasant had to rely on age-old traditions, ingenuity, and sheer resilience to make it through to spring. Unlike today, there were no weather forecasts to warn them of an incoming blizzard. The only signs they had were the shifting skies, the behavior of animals, and the sudden bite in the air. A flock of birds migrating earlier than expected or livestock growing unusually thick winter coats could be indicators of an especially harsh season ahead. Peasants lived in small villages, their homes built from timber, wattle, and daub materials that provided some insulation but hardly enough to keep out the worst of the cold. Snow often crept through the cracks, and the bitter wind made its way inside, chilling everything to the bone. With no glass windows, only wooden shutters or cloth-covered openings kept out the elements. That meant daylight was precious, and as soon as the sun dipped beyond the horizon, the interior of the house became a world of shadows, lit only by the fire or a dim tallow candle. The harsh reality was that winter brought with it not only freezing temperatures but also shorter days, longer nights, and an increased risk of illness, malnutrition, and even death. But despite these hardships, medieval people had their ways of keeping warm. And it all started with their homes. Chapter 2: The Medieval Home, a Winter Fortress. Peasant homes were far from luxurious, but they were designed with survival in mind. These one-room houses were shared with family members and often their livestock, which provided not just food but also warmth. Imagine sleeping just a few feet away from cows, pigs, and chickens, not the most comfortable arrangement, but their body heat helped keep the room above freezing temperatures. The fireplace, or hearth, was the heart of the home. It was the only source of warmth and also served as the main cooking area. Since wood was valuable and often scarce in some regions, peasants would burn peat, dried dung, or straw to keep the fire going. Chimneys were rare in early medieval homes, meaning smoke would fill the house before escaping through a hole in the roof. This might sound unbearable, but it had a surprising benefit: it helped kill insects and preserve the wooden beams of the house. To keep out drafts, peasants often stuffed cracks in the walls with straw, moss, or fabric. In particularly cold regions, they might even hang thick tapestries or animal hides along the walls to provide extra insulation. Floors were usually made of packed earth, sometimes covered with straw or rushes that were periodically replaced to maintain cleanliness and warmth. Since windows were just wooden shutters or cloth-covered holes, they did little to retain heat. As a result, families would often huddle close together near the fire at night, using layers of blankets, fur pelts, and woolen covers to keep warm. The closer you slept to the fire, the better your chances of avoiding the bitter cold. However, this also posed a fire hazard, which meant that maintaining a careful balance between warmth and safety was crucial. Many medieval homes also had lofts or raised platforms where people could sleep. Since heat rises, these areas were slightly warmer than the ground level, making them a preferable place to rest during the coldest nights. Even though these homes were far from comfortable by modern standards, they were carefully arranged to maximize warmth and efficiency, turning a simple structure into a vital fortress against the freezing winter. Chapter 3: Clothing, a Layered Defense. Staying warm wasn't just about heating the home, it was about insulating the body. Medieval peasants relied on layering to trap heat. The first layer was a linen tunic, followed by a woolen overtunic and then a heavy cloak. Wool was a prized fabric, known for its ability to retain heat even when damp. Some wealthier peasants or town dwellers could afford fur-lined cloaks, but most common folk had to make do with woolen hoods, mittens, and thick stockings. For added insulation, peasants would sometimes sew extra layers into their garments, creating a makeshift padding that helped block out the cold. Woolen leg wraps, similar to modern leg warmers, were also common, and even their undergarments were often made of coarse linen to provide an additional layer of warmth. And forget shoes as we know them today. Most peasants wore wooden clogs or leather shoes stuffed with wool or straw for insulation. These makeshift winter boots weren't perfect, but they were better than going barefoot in the snow. Some would even wrap their feet in cloth or strips of fur to provide an extra barrier against the icy ground. Cloaks were especially important, acting like medieval winter coats. Some were fastened with brooches or tied at the neck, while others featured large hoods to shield the wearer from wind and snow. If a peasant was lucky enough to own a sheepskin or fur-lined cloak, they would treasure it, using it as both a garment and a blanket at night. Every piece of clothing had a purpose, whether it was to trap body heat, block wind, or provide makeshift waterproofing. In a time when the cold could mean death, dressing properly was not just a matter of comfort, it was a matter of survival. Chapter 4: Food, Surviving on Preservation. One of the biggest challenges of winter wasn't just staying warm, it was finding enough to eat. By the time the first frost hit, medieval peasants had to rely entirely on the food they had preserved from the previous harvest. Salting, drying, and smoking meat were the most common ways to keep food edible through winter. Root vegetables like turnips, onions, and carrots were stored in cellars or buried underground to prevent them from freezing. Grains were kept in tightly sealed containers to protect them from moisture and pests, ensuring a steady supply of bread and porridge. Bread was baked in large batches and hardened over time, requiring it to be soaked in soups or stews before eating. Speaking of stews, these were a medieval staple. A pot of stew could be left to simmer over the hearth for days, with new ingredients being added as they became available. If you were lucky, you might have access to dried beans, cheese, or even a bit of ale to help make the cold days a little more bearable. In times of extreme scarcity, peasants turned to foraging, gathering nuts, berries, and even edible bark to survive the winter months. Chapter 5: Community and Winter Festivals. Winter was a time of hardship, but it was also a testament to resilience. Medieval peasants understood that survival was not a solitary endeavor. By sticking together, sharing resources, and keeping their spirits high, they increased their chances of making it through the bitter cold to see the first signs of spring. Feasting and storytelling were at the heart of winter survival. When food stores ran low and the days seemed endlessly dark, village gatherings provided much-needed warmth, both physical and emotional. People would huddle together in cottages or communal halls, sharing whatever food they could spare. These feasts, though often humble, brought moments of joy amid the struggle. Porridge, preserved meats, dried fruits, and hearty stews sustained them, and the act of sharing reinforced bonds within the community. Storytelling played an essential role in maintaining morale. Elders passed down legends, folklore, and fables that entertained, taught lessons, and instilled hope. Some stories warned of the dangers of winter spirits, while others reminded listeners that the cold would not last forever. Laughter and song echoed through the gatherings as music and dance helped shake off the gloom. Simple games, riddles, and friendly competitions distracted from the harsh realities of winter. Religious festivals provided not only moments of spiritual reflection but also an opportunity for communal celebration. Christmas, Epiphany, and Candlemas were marked with church services, feasts, and processions. Even amid scarcity, these occasions brought light into the darkness, reminding the people that spring and the renewal of life was on the horizon. The customs varied by region, but the core message remained the same: faith and unity would see them through the coldest months. By coming together, peasants found strength and unity. Even the harshest winters could be endured with companionship, determination, and shared hope. Through these traditions, they did more than just survive, they reaffirmed their connection to one another and to the cycle of the seasons, knowing that after every winter, spring would come again. Chapter 6: Medicine and Winter Illnesses. The cold months were not just about hunger and discomfort. Illness was a constant threat. The frigid air, damp conditions, and lack of proper nutrition left medieval peasants vulnerable to a host of winter ailments. Without modern medicine, they had to rely on herbal remedies, traditional healing practices, and the wisdom of village healers to combat sickness. Common winter ailments, colds, fevers, and respiratory infections were widespread, especially in cramped homes with poor ventilation and smoky hearths. Pneumonia and influenza could be deadly, particularly for the elderly and weak. Frostbite and chilblains were also common among those exposed to the bitter cold for too long, causing painful swelling and even permanent tissue damage. herbal remedies, and folk medicine. Peasants turned to nature for their medicine. Garlic, honey, and vinegar were staple remedies, believed to ward off sickness and strengthen the body. Warm herbal teas made from thyme, sage, or chamomile were used to ease sore throats and congestion, while elderberry syrup was a common remedy for coughs. Mint and fennel helped with digestion, as winter diets were often heavy and monotonous. Poultices made from mustard seeds or onions were applied to the chest to relieve respiratory issues. Local healers and midwives played a crucial role in tending to the sick. They mixed ointments, brewed medicinal drinks, and offered advice based on a blend of knowledge passed down through generations. Some remedies were practical and effective, while others leaned more towards superstition. Faith, superstition, and healing rituals. Many medieval people believed that illness was not just a physical affliction but also a spiritual one. Some saw disease as divine punishment for sins, while others feared that evil spirits or curses could bring misfortune. To protect themselves, people carried charms, amulets, or blessed objects. Holy water was sprinkled over the sick, and prayers were offered to saints known for healing, such as Saint Roch or Saint Sebastian. Some villages performed communal rituals, such as lighting special candles or fasting, in hopes of warding off disease. Despite their hardships, peasants did their best to care for one another during winter illnesses. They shared remedies, tended to the sick, and relied on faith and tradition to make it through the darkest months. While their medical knowledge was limited, their resilience and communal spirit often proved just as important as any cure. Chapter 7. Daily life and routines in winter. Despite the harsh weather, life had to go on. The freezing temperatures and snow-covered fields made farming nearly impossible, but medieval peasants found other ways to stay productive and prepare for the months ahead. Winter was a time of maintenance, craftsmanship, and communal activities that ensured survival until the return of spring. Work and household tasks. With little to do in the fields, peasants focused on tasks that had been set aside during the busier seasons. Tools and farming equipment were repaired, ensuring they would be ready for use once the thaw arrived. Wooden plows, iron sickles, and leather harnesses for animals all needed upkeep. Weaving, spinning wool, and making or mending clothes were also essential winter tasks, as warm garments were necessary for survival in the cold. Women and children spent hours spinning yarn and knitting woolen socks, gloves, and scarves to keep their families warm. Some men took up woodworking, crafting items such as spoons, bowls, or furniture, while others wove baskets from willow branches. These goods could be traded or sold at markets when spring arrived, providing a small but valuable source of income. Those who lived near forests gathered firewood, a task that required constant effort to keep homes heated through the long, frigid months. Food and livelihood. Peasants relied on the food they had stored before winter set in. Root vegetables like turnips, carrots, and onions, along with dried meats and preserved fruits, made up most of their meals. Bread remained a staple, often supplemented with cheese and whatever grains had been saved from the harvest. Some families kept chickens for eggs, while others might have a pig that was slaughtered and preserved in salt to last through the season. Since fresh food was scarce, every scrap was used wisely. Soups and stews were common, as they stretched ingredients further and provided much-needed warmth. Herbs and spices were precious, used sparingly to add flavor and medicinal benefits to winter meals. Evening activities and community life. With limited daylight, peasants made the most of the long winter nights by gathering around the fire. Storytelling was a cherished tradition, passing down history, folklore, and lessons from one generation to the next. Elders recounted tales of mythical creatures, heroic knights, and spirits that roamed the winter forests. These stories were both entertaining and instructive, teaching children about the dangers of the world and the values of hard work and resilience. Games and music helped lighten the mood during the cold months. Simple board games made from wood, dice games, and riddle contests provided amusement. Some villages had musicians who played flutes, fiddles, or drums, creating lively moments of dance and song to lift spirits. Religious devotion remained strong in winter, with many seeking solace in faith. Church services were attended regularly, offering hope and reminding people that the cold and darkness would not last forever. Special feast days such as Christmas and Candlemas provided brief moments of celebration where communities came together to share what little they had. Endurance and survival. Even in the darkest months, peasants never stopped working. Their survival depended on the preparations they had made before winter and their ability to endure the hardships that came with it. Though food was scarce, illnesses were common, and the cold was unforgiving, the resilience of medieval villagers allowed them to push through. Their daily routines, filled with hard work and communal support, ensured that they would live to see another planting season and the return of spring. Conclusion: the fight for survival. The medieval winter was unforgiving, but the people who lived through it were even tougher. They didn't just endure, they adapted. Their survival depended on their ability to make the most of the resources available to them, no matter how scarce. Through generations of trial and error, they developed techniques that allowed them to withstand the bitter cold, from building insulated homes and layering thick woolen clothing to preserving food months in advance. More importantly, they relied on each other, knowing that survival was not an individual struggle, but a communal effort. Winter tested their resilience in every way. Food shortages, illness, and freezing temperatures were constant threats, yet medieval peasants found ways to push through. Their ability to prepare for the worst, their reliance on traditional remedies, and their deeply ingrained sense of faith and folklore all contributed to their endurance. While we might look back at their lives with sympathy, it is also worth recognizing the sheer strength, resourcefulness, and ingenuity that allowed them to outlast even the harshest winters. Today, we have modern conveniences that make winter more of an inconvenience than a true battle for survival. Central heating, insulated homes, warm clothing, and readily available food mean that even the coldest months pose little threat to most of us. Yet, despite our advancements, the lessons from the past remain valuable. The importance of preparation, community, and resilience is just as relevant today as it was centuries ago. So the next time you shiver stepping outside in the winter chill, just remember, at least you don't have to sleep next to a cow to stay warm. The medieval peasants' fight against the elements was nothing short of remarkable, a testament to human adaptability and determination. If you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to subscribe to Brothers Explore for more fascinating dives into history and forgotten survival techniques. Stay warm, stay curious, and we'll see you in the next adventure.